In this video, I would like to introduce the process of natural selection, an extremely important process in biology and one that we will continue to talk about over the course of the semester and the year. The process of natural selection is a process in which inherited biological traits, specifically DNA, become more or less common in a population by increasing or decreasing the opportunity for an individual to survive and reproduce within their environment. You probably have heard before or in the past that natural selection is the survival of the fittest or the strongest, and into a sense that is actually correct, but really it's based off of the inheritance of DNA and the increase or decrease of the DNA that produces specific traits or characteristics, allowing individuals of the same species and competing with one another to be able to survive and reproduce and have offspring that reproduce. And so another way of saying that, and read down on the bottom here, individuals with traits best fit for the environment will survive to reproduce and pass on their traits to their offspring. The process of natural selection is the driving force, or what causes biological evolution. And biological evolution is simply the change in allele frequencies of heritable characteristics of a population. And what that really means is that alleles are going to, again, be a particular type or form of a trait, and so it's the changing of how many of those particular forms of traits we see within a population, and in those traits being able to be inherited by offspring from their parents. An extremely key component or important part is that this only occurs in populations. It's not in individuals. Natural selection is only able to work on populations, and thus biological evolution only occurs in populations, not within individuals themselves. And it's primarily the result of different environment changes or things in the environment that select some individuals to be better able to survive than others, or better fit, as a way of explaining that. And so it's based off of kind of four main factors. The first is overproduction of offspring, which usually results in some sort of competition. There's usually or oftentimes more individuals present in the environment than can be supported by the environment. And so if there's a whole bunch of individuals and there's not quite enough food for everybody to be able to survive, unfortunately some are going to be able to get that food and some are not going to be able to get that food. And those that are not able to get that food are not able to survive and pass on their traits. There's some sort of environmental selection, and this could come in a variety of different ways. There might be a predator, there might be a change in the environment that favors a particular type or individual within that species, a form of that species, and what this leads to is higher fitness or the ability to survive of some trait forms over another. Third is variation. The presence of genetic variation within individuals in a population is extremely important and essential for natural selection to be able to take place. Without variation within the population, if everybody looks the same or does the same thing, there's going to be that produces no variation, and any change in the environment, any selection factor, is not then going to allow for some individuals to be able to survive in that species because everybody is the same. And lastly, the fourth important factor is heredity, or the being able to inherit or pass on characteristics which are derived from DNA, from parents to offspring. So these four components work together and are what cause natural selection to be able to take place. And so let's kind of walk through the process of this. Let's pretend that there is an abundance of resources, whether that be food or space or mates, shelter, water, elements, minerals. It really depends on the particular type of species that we're looking at. But if there's an abundance of resources, individuals are going to have a high chance of being able to reproduce and will have a high success rate, and this is going to lead the population to increase very quickly. But eventually there's going to get to a point where there's too many individuals and there's simply not enough resources to be spread around. There's not enough resources to be able to support everybody, and so the population is eventually going to crash. But the way in which the population will crash will depend on the variation within the population. For example, not all of these rabbits look exactly the same. Some might have a little bit darker fur color and some might have a little bit lighter fur color. And in this situation, if the lighter fur color rabbits don't have as good of a chance of being able to get food or hiding from predators, the darker colored fur color rabbits are going to have a higher chance of survival, and we'll see those be the individuals within this species have a better chance of survival. And so the population we can see here increases, and then eventually there gets to be too many and not enough resources, and the population is going to crash and decrease. But the key component here, the key part, is the individuals that are dying are the ones that are less fit. In my pretend example, the rabbits with lighter fur color. And this again all goes back to variation. Individuals with the traits or the form of the trait, fur color for example, best for the environment are able to survive and then have offspring that looks mostly similar to them. And so over time, as this cycle continues, we can see the population change. And one of the most common examples of the process of natural selection involves some moths in England during the Industrial Revolution, in which there was a change in the population from very light-colored moths to darker-colored moths. And we'll talk about this and examine this in some labs and activities within class. Lastly, before I end, Stated Clearly is a channel on YouTube that has a really good video that further explains the process of natural selection and gives some good visual examples, and is one that I recommend watching to help further explain this process.